a little bit of a quote that I found fascinating. It took place before the Imola Grand Prix. Zach Brown, McLaren's team principal, he was on the Beyond the Grid podcast, and he said, I think there are 6 or 7 drivers on the grid who would be world champions with the Red Bull. As great as Max is, I don't think he would win the world championship in any car other than the Red Bull at this point. Okay, I have a couple of follow-ups, but first and foremost, Laz, do you think these comments are fair?
I do, insofar as the Red Bull is a huge part of the reason why Max Verstappen has had this sustained success. Now, if it's 6 or 7 drivers up against Max in a Red Bull, then maybe not, because I think Max would have that extra little bit. And, you know, it would be fascinating to see Lewis Hamilton in the same car as him, Lando Norris in the same car as him, you know, and see what would happen. But if you look at the way he's able to drive that car and on the limit, then yes. Now, if we're talking about a theoretical scenario where Max has taken out the Red Bull and somebody else is dropped in of that standard, so be it Lewis or Lando Norris or whatever, yeah, I think that would be the case. And then look, you know, we kind of have proof of that as well. The Mercedes domination era, you know, Lewis Hamilton was winning season after season after season. Max Verstappen would win the odd race. And this is, you know, Zach hasn't said he, you know, other drivers wouldn't win races, or clearly are winning races anyway. And so when, Lewis had the dominant car, he was winning championships. He no longer has the dominant car. He's no longer winning championships. So I think this is kind of like pointing out the obvious to some extent. And would Max win in any car that isn't the Red Bull? Absolutely, he would win races. No doubt about it. He'd be able to do the kind of thing that Lando Norris did in Miami. You know, I think he'd capitalize on situations left, right, and center. But would it be enough to win a championship, which is what Zach's talking about? I don't think so. Not if somebody else of a high standard was in the Red Bull. So if it was a straight swap, Lando Norris in the Red Bull, Max in the McLaren, I think Lando Norris is going to win the championship at the end of this year. So that's my opinion. So I saw this quote as well, and I saw it get a lot of heat on social media. I don't think it's necessary to say, you know, I think there was a little bit of him saying it, knowing it would get a reaction, but it's hard to disagree with him.
Zach Brown? Would he do that?
Yeah. Surely not.
I think he's been in full piss off Christian Horner mode as well, hasn't he, recently? So, you know, he was saying that Newey had been handing out CVs had been dropping in left, right, and center from Red Bull. But I think Laurence is right. I mean, if we could probably count on one hand, right, the amount of drivers that you would make that swap. If you're a Red Bull, you say, right, you're losing Max, but you can take any other driver on the grid. Lewis, Fernando, you definitely would switch them at a drop of a hat. Then I think the next two, you've got Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris. Obviously, have both won races, but we probably haven't seen enough from them in title-winning cars, but I also feel like they haven't had that opportunity fully yet. You know, Charles, Ferrari all fell apart in 22. Maybe Russell. You know, I think that's, you know, I don't know. I feel like Russell of those 3 is probably at the bottom of that list. Then,
and just to be clear, of these names you just listed, those are names, drivers you think if they were in the RB20, they could win a world championship this season.
No, I think Laurence is right. I think a lot of drivers could go in, but I think if you were to be honest about the discussion, if you were Red Bull, those would be the 5 you'd want to replace Max with. For the reason being that, I remember. So when I grew up, a big Schumacher fan, I had a lot of friends of mine who'd say it's just the car, it's just the car. Then when Vettel was winning, people said it was just the car. When Lewis was winning, it was just the car, etc. And I've always made the point to people that say that the car in Formula One is obviously a huge deal. But if it was just the car, then Formula One would be paying a guy, Red Bull would be paying a guy like me. They'd say, look, we're going to pay you £100 a week. Go sit in that car and just turn the steering wheel, and you'll win the championship. And it's not as simple as that. You know, you need to still have the best driver and the best car. And we're seeing with Perez, you know, the pressure that can come with having a great car. Obviously, in his situation, he's got a great teammate that's kind of, you know, knocking him back a bit at times. But I think that to actually win races with a great car is still a difficult thing, because you have the pressure, the expectation that you should win it. So I think those are the 5 guys I would say you would definitely put in there. Then you've got some fun left field ones. Alex Albon, it would be great to see him in a car like that. Like Yuki, we're seeing him tear it up at the moment. How would Yuki deal with a car, with a situation like where he's expected to win a championship? I mean, would we get the old Yuki that's kind of, you know, flipping his lid every 10 minutes? Would we get the new Yuki that thinks about it before he hits the radio? You don't know. So I think I agree with Zach Brown, but like to Lawrence's point, that's always been the case with Formula One, and the driver is still the key difference maker. So I think that a lot of people saw that as like a real insult to Max, but I think actually the point he's making is we've got a very talented field in Formula. Well, at least the point I would make would be we've got a very talented field in Formula One right now. And yeah, there's a few guys that could step in there and do this same job. Whether they could be doing it as well as Max, I think that's probably where we need to talk about it. You know, he's had this run of consecutive poles. He's had all the wins over the last few years. Would any of those guys be able to do it as well as Max? I think what we've seen Max do is kind of reach that level where he's so good, so confident that he's hit that stride of just almost unbeatable form. Obviously, we've seen some holes in that recently, but I'm not sure if all those guys I named would be as dominant as this. But again, we won't know. It's a great hypothetical, and I'm sure someone else could come back and just disagree with everything I've said, which is the nature of a hypothetical. But yeah, I think if you boil down the quote to what he said, spot on. You know, 5, maybe you could throw a name or two other. Maybe I'm missing an obvious name that I haven't said there. You know, you've got like Sainz and Piastri. Like, could they do it? Are they just actually, you know, good drive? I think there's a difference between great drivers and good drivers in F1. So it's a good debate. And yeah, I think Zach, I didn't see the interview, but I imagine when Zach said it, he had a little grin forming on his face as well.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.